Welcome to the Borgen podcast, the only English language show about fictional Danish politics. On our show, we explore the people, events, and parties that make up the fictional Danish parliament on Borgen. I'm one of your hosts, Amy, coming at you from Istanbul, Turkey. And as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Chantal, who broadcasts from her room with a fabulous view in Toronto, Canada. Now, we're going to be talking about season 2, episodes 1 and 2 today. And I just wanted to acknowledge that the first episode in season 2 opens partially in Afghanistan with Birgitte Nyborg visiting Danish troops there. And of course, I want to acknowledge that since this season of Borgen aired originally, obviously, things have changed radically in Afghanistan, and the situation there has become rather dire, as it has in Ukraine and in other places as well. In living in Turkey, I'm very aware of the geopolitical location of all of these countries and of the enormous number of refugees who are fleeing for their lives, actually, most of the time. And I just wanted to acknowledge everybody who has friends or family that's touched by any of these conflicts, whether you are helping people out or whether you know people who are in the forces on any side, or if you know anyone who is involved in any way. We just wanted to acknowledge that we understand that it's a really difficult time for a lot of people. And so if you don't want to hear us talk about this necessarily, this might be an episode for you to skip if you have real sensitivities about warfare and stuff, because it is a little bit sensitive. So we just wanted to acknowledge that. We just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that we're aware of the situation, although neither one of us is a political reporter or a political scientist by any means. It's important to recognize that people's lives can change very, very quickly, very, very suddenly, and very, very dramatically at the moment's notice. And we just wanted to acknowledge that that's what's happening in the world right now before we start talking about episode 1, season 2. And this episode is being delivered to you by Chantal. So I'm going to throw it over to her now. And so, Chantal, welcome to it.
Welcome to it. Thank you, Amy. So I'm going to be talking about, we're now in season 2, and we're talking about episode 1 of Borgen. Season 2 opens up 11 months after where we left off in the season finale of season 1. The first scene is Birgitte in Afghanistan. Kasper and Katrine are also there. They are in a war zone with the Taliban present around them. Katrine is now working for Express, which is Michael Lageson's newspaper. A young soldier who looks just over 20 years old asks for a photo with Birgitte because he's going to miss her speech. She's very friendly and charismatic, meeting all of the soldiers, and the young soldier makes a comment about, quote, babes being a real sight in these parts. And I thought it was really funny and cute, and it made Birgitte grin, and she takes photos with him. Yeah, I thought that was really sweet, right? And she just thought it was cute, so she did it, and it made him really happy. Birgitte gives a speech to all of the soldiers about promoting peace and democracy in Afghanistan, and that she reckons that they will have to withdraw their troops soon and the mission will end. She thanks them in a genuine and sincere way. One of the head soldiers comes to tell her that he's lost 4 of his soldiers, and the word comes in that moment that a group of their soldiers is under heavy fire and there is hostile activity out there around them. They are told that the PM and the defense minister, which is Hans Christensen, will be flown out now back to Copenhagen. Katrine is in the thick of it and wants to stay for her cameraman to shoot the photos and cover the situation, despite Kasper coming up to her and telling her that they should leave now and that there's room for them on their plane. But Katrine opts to stay in Afghanistan. The Secretary of State is on the phone with them and says they're on a plane right back to Copenhagen. The Americans want them to postpone the withdrawal. Birgitte says the aim is to withdraw the troops and put the Afghans in charge. The Americans, by saying this, don't think that the Afghans are ready for the responsibility. Christensen learns that 5 of their Danish soldiers have died today. Birgitte says that they need to get all of the soldiers out and home now. Kasper advises Birgitte to call a press conference as soon as possible when they get back to Copenhagen. Arriving in Copenhagen, Birgitte returns to her house very late at night. She sees a welcome home sign that one of her kids has made for her. And she's so tired that she just falls asleep in her son's room without even getting changed. The next morning, Philip comes over to the house with Magnus, who has spent the night with Philip. Philip makes a comment about the trip, and Birgitte says it was a terrible trip. Philip rapidly changes the subject, and he asks her if she signed the papers. She asks what papers, and he replies, the divorce papers. You need to fill them out. She says that she can't remember where she put them, and she apologizes and asks him if he wants a coffee. He says, no, those papers, I just want those papers. And he points out that he's moved out 10 months ago and wants her to buy him out of the house so that he can move on. She tells him to have a fresh set of papers sent over to her and she will sign them. Now over to TV1, Ulrich is interviewing Torben on camera, and Torben says that this is probably Brigitte's most difficult situation as the PM up until now. He says that as PM, she has to support the war effort, even though she's opposed to it. Birgitte meets with the defense minister and the minister for Europe, which is Jacob Cruz. The US is asking Denmark to stay in Afghanistan. Birgitte wants to know what the defense chief thinks. Christensen says the military does as they're told, but they don't want to withdraw from an enemy they think that they can beat. Birgitte and the ministers agree on the language that, quote, we still want the withdrawal, but we're following the situation closely. Kasper tells Birgitte to change her shirt and wear something black and buttoned up before going out to speak to the press. We meet Kasper's girlfriend in this episode. Her name is Lotte, and she's very sweet and attentive. She prepared a nice welcome home lunch for him. They talk about moving in together. Kasper tells her he's got 2 suitcases and a crate, and that's it. She asks him if they're jumping the gun by doing this, and he says no. His response is, you are the most beautiful woman in the world, which to me was an immature response. And later on in the episode, as they're making a toast with wine, he accidentally calls her Katrine.
Of course he does.
At Brigitte's house, Birgitte is home and the babysitter is leaving. On the TV, Hesselbo's on the news and he puts Birgitte down. He says, the PM is in favor of withdrawing the troops, but the Afghans are not ready to take control of the country. In 2 years, Afghans can take over the Helmand province. When I was PM, we proposed to send down Leopard tanks. Nyborg rejected that proposal, and now 5 Danish soldiers are dead. Hesselbo is trying to pin this on Birgitte. Brigitte's daughter, Laura, comes home and says that she went skating, but her skates are at the house untouched, which means that Laura was not telling the truth about her whereabouts. She tells Birgitte that she wants a home-cooked dinner, and Birgitte says she didn't have time today, but how about tomorrow? Katrine and her cameraman are now back from Afghanistan and back to work at Express, and she tells Lagerson that she wants to contact the family of one of the fallen soldiers. It is actually the soldier that in the beginning of the episode was asking Birgitte to take a photo with him. Lagerson gives Katrine a suggestion for the title and says, quote, Birgitte Nyborg hesitates, soldiers die. He's going to write in his editorial that Birgitte doesn't have the balls for war and that he wants Katrine's article to back him up. This to me shows that Lagerson is very immature and he still has a knife in the back of Birgitte. Katrine goes on to see the son's father. This is the soldier. She goes to see his father, who is a car salesman, and she shows up at his work and he has not even read the letter yet because he's hurt and he's in denial of what the son went there against his wishes, and now the son is dead. Later, Katrine and Hen talk about the article, and Hen tells her that she cannot publish the story without featuring the letter in the article. Kasper tells Katrine that Lagerson wields the pen and tells her what to write, even if the angle is wrong, and it puts a bad spin on Birgitte. In the later scene with Lagerson and Han, Katrine tells them that she can't write something she does not believe in. She wants to write a profile on the 23-year-old soldiers that died and focus on the goodbye letter that he wrote to his father. She has to get the soldier's dad's permission in order to print the story. She goes back to see the soldier's father at his workplace and impresses upon him that he should read the letter to better understand his son and try to get some closure. Brigitte takes a call from the American Secretary of State's representative, and he tells her that he talked to the Minister of Defense, which is Christensen, and he tells her that Brigitte was trying to find a roundabout way of the withdrawal of the Danish forces. Kasper tells her 3 more soldiers have died for a total of 8 in 2 days. Brigitte meets with the head of an Afghan NGO, and the representative, a woman, tells Brigitte that she understands why the Danish government wishes to withdraw, but that the Danish presence in Afghanistan is crucial. She asks to see Brigitte's wallet and takes out the credit cards and says, these all represent freedom and democracy. And she, as a woman, was not allowed to have a driver's license because she was a woman, but now she can. She says that you can't change the Afghan way of life overnight, but things are changing and hope exists. It is the result of Denmark being there. Bent tells Brigitte that he heard she changed her stance in Afghanistan and that the moderates don't believe in participating in armed conflicts. And she tells him that it's a beautiful principle, but it's outdated. She points to him that she inherited this war from Hesselbo, but it toppled the Taliban. And Bent tells her that the topple should be through democratic means. Brigitte tells him, how do you topple a dictatorship through democratic means? She says she wants out of there, but they can't withdraw until the situation is stable. It's dangerous and it's risky to pull out during an attack. Katrine stands up to Lagerson. She tells him that she doesn't have a story it's absurd to write a headline that blames Brigitte and puts the pressure on her and tells her that he pays her 60K Danish kroner a month, which, Amy, I did the calculation that actually works out to be about $11,000 Canadian a month, which is
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. $132,000 a year salary in Canadian dollars.
Sweet. I want to go be a Danish tabloid reporter. I got those skills. I'm telling you.
Later, back at Brigitte's house, Philip comes over and is pleasant with her. She was taking a nap on the couch. She offers him dinner and he says he's just there for the papers. I think that she's got so much pressure going on with work and wants to believe, and she just wants to have some simple platonic companionship to unwind and feel normal for a little bit. She tells him she does not want to divorce him and she starts crying. And that, quote, I can't take it anymore. I'm at war in the office and I'm at war at home. I want you to be my husband. I don't want a divorce. And as she's saying that, we see Laura come down the stairs and she was sitting there listening. So she's heard Brigitte's words to Philip. Philip holds Brigitte in his arms and says, sometimes we have to do things even when we don't want to, okay? The parents of the soldiers show up to the parliament and Kasper thinks that she should not meet with any of them as they blame Brigitte for the loss of their children and the press is outside. Hesselbo tells the press not to expect Brigitte to show up, but Brigitte shows up despite Kasper's advice to meet the press and family members of the soldiers. The car salesman is there. This is the father of the young soldier who took the photo with Brigitte, who Katrine is trying to write the story about. Brigitte has a private meeting with the soldier's father behind closed doors. He reads the letter his son wrote to Brigitte. These were the letters that they were all these soldiers were asked to write in the event that they didn't make it home. The letter says that 89,000 Afghan children survived and that schools and hospitals are being built. The letter goes on to say that this makes sense to be there for him to help with this. And in the end, the father gives the letter to Katrine and tells her to write the story and that maybe there's some sense to all of this. Brigitte requests to see the defense chief. She saw him last in person when they were down in Afghanistan together at the beginning of this episode, and he arrives at Parliament 30 minutes just after coming back to Copenhagen. She tells him that the cabinet is set to vote in favor of the withdrawal. She asks the colonel what he thinks about the situation, and what his personal opinion is. He says that there is only one way, which is a joint international coordinated effort, and that their allies must neutralize the current wave of attacks. He says, quote, we must stay in Afghanistan until we've trained the army and the police, which will take 5 to 6 years. And we will require more soldiers, equipment, and money. She seems to take the suggestion and asked him to write it up in a memo, which I thought was very smart of her, to go to the source and follow a real expert, which is this colonel. It was, to me, it's the mark of a great leader to admit when she needs guidance from an expert on a topic that she is not familiar about as much as he is. And it shows to me that she's clearly not driven by ego. The episode ends with Katrine handing her completed article to Lagerson and Hahn of the young soldier's letter. Ulrich reported in the news that the government has increased their efforts in Afghanistan. Amir, one of Brigitte's ministers, saying to the press that, quote, "We are against the war, but we don't want to jeopardize the government." In the final scene, Birgitte is home with Philip, and Philip is over, and she is signing the divorce papers.
Yeah, so I just wanted to note, Amir's not one of Brigitte's ministers. He's the leader of the Greens. He's a Green Party member. So yeah, he's definitely an opposition party, but they often collaborate, the moderates and the Greens on the left.
All right. Sorry about that, everybody.
No problem. No problem.
So that's my summary of episode 1, season 2. Amy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like I said in the opening, like since this episode took place, like a lot has changed in Afghanistan, and I believe that things have gotten worse there recently, in particular. And so, like, it's so easy. Like, that's the one thing about fictional representations of warfare. It's like, it's so simplified in some ways. Like, we see a very positive, like, isn't this how things should be kind of thing, presentation of like the way leaders interact with the military leaders and stuff. And I have a feeling, of course, in real life, there are many more layers. And it's much more complicated than it could ever be presented in a TV show. Mm-hmm. But as far as the show itself goes, I thought it shows, you know, Birgitte in terms of like her party being, you know, aware, like she's aware that, you know, you can't have it both ways, right? Like, indeed, you can't always get what you want.
Yeah.
And you have to do things you don't want to do. But to actually take into account, like, it's interesting. I thought it was interesting, like the number of times she spoke to the chiefs of defense and the military leaders, and they say things like, well, we're just waiting for your decision. Like, mm-hmm. we follow orders. Like, we're soldiers, we follow orders. What's mm-hmm. the order? You're the chief. And for her to actually like bend the rule and say like, no, I need to know. I think that's really actually clever. I don't know if that happens in real life politics. But if I was in a leadership position, I would definitely ask military advisors, like, what's the actual situation?
Yeah.
It's totally not everybody's field. Like, I don't know what's required there or anywhere.
Right.
So to ask somebody what they actually need, I mean, that's a smart way to do things. And then to deliver that message that way, I think is really good, actually. And I think it was the difficult decision to stay there and not bring your troops home, because obviously nobody wants you have an army, but like nobody wants to go send people off to get killed anywhere. But unfortunately, as we are seeing, it's not a choice a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. So in terms of the story in the show, I thought it was very, very well done. And like the compromise is such a thin line, and it kind of ends up working. And they were, I think, made a good decision to stay. And like the thing about training the army and the police forces is, you know, it could sound kind of colonial and like patriarchal in some ways, or like, you know what I mean by patriarchal, like not in the terms of like feminism patriarchy, but in terms of like an overriding father figure.
Right.
There must be another name for it. That's like, it's kind of colonialism. What's the word I'm thinking of? Patronizing, maybe, but like this kind of like, let us help you. But yeah, I think that actually is part of the mission of people being in Afghanistan. I don't know for sure. I should have done a little research on that, I guess. But I think it's important to note that that's what, you know, was being said. And also that when Bent said, I prefer to solve the problem through diplomatic means or democratic means, there is no way to solve those issues with democracy. It's mm-hmm. not going to work in places like that, because the rules aren't the same. Nobody's playing by rules in when there's terrorist blocks that are fueled by religious fanaticism, you're not going to get democracy. That they're not interested in democratic means. So you have to use other means.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting that they said, in 5 days, eight soldiers were killed, and that, like, what a high number that was. And I was like, really? Is that really a high number? And I'm thinking of, like, what's happening in other places right now, and thinking that's not a high number.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very interesting. And I liked the storyline with the father of the young soldier. And of course, it's the soldier that gets shown with the picture of Brigitte in the beginning.
Yeah.
There's a story structure, there's a fictional structure that you have to have that, right? Right. I mean, it's the smoking gun principle. If you have a gun in the story, it's got to go off, right? So you've got to have, that soldier has to be brought back into the story somehow. And I just thought it was really sad and tragic. And I bet a lot of people Denmark doesn't have, like, Turkey has forced military, well, not forced, but, kind of required military service. Okay. Unless you can afford to buy your way out of it, which you can. Almost every young man here is expected to serve time in the military.
Right.
And if you're a university student or you're planning to go to university, your time is shorter than if you're not. And there's different rules and stuff. And it's changed in recent years to become a bit of a lighter term. But I certainly know people who've seen some conflict here during their military service, and it's random where you get sent. And, in like Northwestern Europe, it's not a thing. You don't have to serve in the military.
Mm-hmm.
So to volunteer to go do something like that in a place where, that's secure, like Canada, that's secure, and like where people don't have to do that as a requirement. It's hard to conceive of why somebody would want to join the army. But people do, out of a sense of service and duty, and like wanting to help in this, like, different way. And also, there are all kinds of, you can get all kinds of training in the military that you might not be able to do outside. We both know somebody who's got in the Canadian military who's got an excellent position. We have a friend there, and a mutual friend there. And then my cousins also served in the Canadian military in Afghanistan, actually. So it was not a pretty time at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought they handled the storyline very well. And it's a little PC, I think, a little gentle, but I think for a TV show about, like, come on.
I think the point comes across. I mean, even though the numbers were low, relatively speaking, the point came across very loud and clear to me that this is a tragic situation. And when someone said in the show, in the beginning of the episode, this is her hardest decision and hardest situation she's had to. So it was interesting to see how she navigates that through. And a lot of it is so much that she cannot control. Being in a place with war and conflict, she cannot just flip a switch and control it. There are a lot of things that are out of her hand. And the only thing that she can do is remain informed and try and make great decisions based on the opinions and judgment of people who are far more experts than she is, right?
Yeah.
And to show sympathy and compassion. I mean, the fact that she met with the soldier's father behind closed doors and he read the letter out in front of her, to me showed that she had a lot of kindness and compassion to take time out of her day to listen to that, and that she wants to feel connected and understand the situation from many people's points of view, not just from a PM point of view, but listen to what a parent of a fallen soldier has to say and react. And what did this soldier have to say too? Right?
Exactly. And the soldier's point of view is also important. And definitely gains were made for a while, gains were made there. And, and I mean, of course, many people left Afghanistan before the war or in the early days of it to get away. I mean, like in Toronto, there's a large Afghani community, a large expat or refugee community. And, I worked with some of those kids when I was teaching in the Toronto District School Board, actually many years ago in my previous life. And people are people. If one thing like living abroad and like traveling and meeting people from all over the place teaches you, it's like people are people. Everybody has the same goals in life. Everybody wants to just do their thing and, have do a meaningful work and have a family and have people in their lives they care about. It's not different. And, it's really important to like acknowledge that. And what the woman who represented the NGO said, even though I felt like that was very simplified as well, like, it's a very convenient device in terms of storytelling. But it's also true. Like those things are true. That's the truth. You see photos from the 1960s in Afghanistan and people were absolutely free. It looked like any European city. Kabul looked like any European city. And so, people remember that's not that long ago. People have memories of that, and everybody deserves to have basic freedoms.
Yeah, absolutely. So bringing it back to some of the characters now, I thought Philip, like to me, when she comes back home for the first time and she falls asleep, dead tired in Magnus's bed, and she doesn't even change her clothes or anything. And she wakes up the next morning and Philip comes over. I just felt the weight that she was carrying, that she must have been carrying, the emotional exhaustion and, the wear and tear of the whole situation, both emotional and physical, that she's going through from traveling and having to be there and stuff like that. And the next morning he asks, how's it going? And she said it was terrible. And he just like changes the subject and says, oh yeah, don't forget to sign the divorce papers. Like I was disappointed in Philip for that. I thought he could have, listened.
Yeah. But is it his role to anymore? He needs to move on with his life as well. Maybe he was just putting up a boundary. But maybe it's also a little bit, it's kind of selfish too at the same time.
I think it's selfish. And what it came across to me is he's annoyed that she's not prioritizing him. And why didn't she do the divorce papers instead of remembering to like make decisions about, So I didn't like that at all. And then the comment about Kasper when, we meet the girlfriend and she's putting together a nice dinner for him, and his response, she asked him if we're jumping the gun by, moving in together. And he says, no, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. And when I heard that, I watched this episode.
I laughed actually.
When I rewatched it, I laughed out loud and I'm just like, is that the response you want to hear? Amy, is that the response you'd want to hear from a man? That's not the response I'd want to hear. I don't want to hear.
Be like, yeah, what's your point? That's not the answer to the question.
What's your point? What's your point? It's
like, of course of course, and B, like, but you didn't answer the question. You have to press him. He's a spin doctor. You can't believe anything that comes out of that guy's mouth.
Exactly. But what it said to me was that he can understand the roles in the workplace and the nuances of political figures very well. He's going to be a spin doctor.
His personal life is a joke.
But when it comes to women and his personal matters, he's a mess.
Yeah, an absolute mess.
No, this is not what a woman wants to hear. I don't know. I thought the woman should have been like, this is not the answer that I should be hearing right now. So,
yeah, and what does she need him for anyway? Like, her apartment is so nice. It's in these, like, when they show her a building,
balcony?
Like it's this. Yeah, the exterior is like these beautiful modern white condos, and then the inside is like beautiful inside and like not huge, but like very modern and very, it looks like an art gallery in there kind of. And it's like got a great kitchen, and like she has this fabulous life. She's like a communications officer. Katrine knows who she is because Katrine's a fan of this woman's blog, right?
Okay.
And she seems really pulled together and like really smart and really cool. So what is she doing with a bum like Kasper? Like, she could do so much better.
I know, but I guess, a lot of people see the appeal in Kasper, and she wants to have a partner. So she thought, why not?
And he's a naughty boy, and they obviously get along. Like, some people like that. Not that I'm saying anything. But like, they obviously have great chemistry. They're all over each other, and she's just trying to make things happen with him. And it does seem kind of good. It sort of seems like Kasper's trying to fix himself, but he's not quite there yet.
I think he's trying to fix himself too. I think he's trying to feel some normalcy maybe and balance his life that he has no life. So, maybe it'll be fun and interesting to actually date somebody and move in with them. Maybe that will straighten him out a bit. But I
also think it's interesting that Katrine's at the Express now. I thought that was a really cool storyline. Like she quits at the end of season 1, she quits TV1 in this fury of like integrity. And then she goes and works for this shitty tabloid. And I thought it was, or like a less, a semi-tabloidish paper. Yeah. Like their headlines are a little more sensational and stuff.
Well, and then she went to go work for Lagesson, which I don't know. Yeah. I do see the point why she left because,
of course,
just to recap why she left, it was because of the portrait interview that she was tasked to do, which Kasper had arranged for her, which was very kind of him. And then behind the scenes, they were going to doctor the interview and they were going to cut bits and pieces and edit it to create this slant that they wanted to create. When she got wind of that, she said, forget it. And she got very angry and she left.
And Kasper was calling the editorial shots, and that's not okay.
Not a good idea. And no. I think a woman of Katrine's caliber, even though she's so young in her age, she's got
journalistic clout.
Yes. And she can bounce from a job to another job. She'll always land, right? Yeah. She's got something very desirable in her that people will pay attention to her and take her back, and she can bounce jobs and be successful.
She gains an awesome coworker because she's teamed up with Hannah Holm again. And I'm so excited about that because she's one of my favorite characters in the whole series.
I know. I'm excited about it too. And I like that they're working together, which could be our segue into episode 2.
Absolutely.
We see them. Let me just pull up my notes there for episode 2. So
while you're doing that, I just want to say one thing. If I sound like my voice is not quite right, it's because my voice is not quite right. I have had the COVID this week. So I've been home. I think that's also why this episode 1, it made me, it set me off in such a deep thinking pattern about current events because I've been home alone for
you've been 8
days. Yeah, we had 2 snow days. And then the weekend came and I started not feeling well on the weekend. And I went and tested on last Sunday and tested positive for COVID. And that required me to have a 7-day quarantine. Today is the last day of my quarantine. So I'll be expected to be back at work on Monday, but like I'm definitely was not feeling well. And I spent a lot of time like moping around. So if I sounded morose when I was talking about those things, it's because I've been in my head alone, isolated for a week.
For the whole week.
So that's, for the whole week. Like I was talking to the cats. So that's kind of why, I mean, of course my coworkers checked in and friends checked in and my neighbor brought me vitamin C and some decongestants and stuff. And it wasn't too bad, but like, I had the COVID. So,
Well, you're all better now because, you and I were
pretty much.
You and I were in touch this week and I was concerned to hear you were sick, but I'm so happy to hear you're better and you're back. You're back.
Yes.
On the podcast and your voice is fine. So
good. It's a little creaky, I think, but not too bad.
I don't think it's noticeable at all.
Good. Maybe it's ordinarily husky anyway,
All right. So shall we go into episode 2?
Yes, let's. Yeah.
Episode 2 opens up at the Parliament with the young blonde TV1 reporter Simon, reporting that, quote, the new European Commissioner is being selected as we speak. He sees Katrine and has some snide remarks, such as suggesting she works for a tabloid now, because as we know, she left TV1, she took a job at Lagesson's paper called Express. Katrine says to Kasper that when they have a moment alone walking down the hall that, quote, Labour might get the post in exchange for one of their ministries. But a few seconds later, Katrine joins Birgitte for coffee and croissants in her office. And she says, quote, that won't happen. So let's spin it like that. The blonde male secretary, who's the secretary to the Queen, right, Amy? That's what we said.
I think so. Yeah. He's like the permanent secretary. He's a permanent secretary. So he's always there. He's like,
always there and always working with whatever PM is in.
Yes. I think he's the Queen's representative. I think.
I think so too. He seems to have a lot of clout about him.
Like I said before, we're not experts on Danish politics, so you can come at us if you want. and correct that, that's fine. Hi, listeners.
Exactly.
Hi.
We're not above correction. We make mistakes.
Yeah.
We make mistakes. So anyways, Niles comes in and suggests to use the post to exile someone who is not very desirable to keep and make it look like a promotion. But when questioned by Kasper, he says, yeah, that would be going too far. But after Niles leaves Brigitte, Brigitte says to Kasper, still, a lot of Danish politicians have been sent to Brussels, never to be heard of again. And funny story, Amy, I actually saw a meme of this on Twitter recently.
Oh,
This is a scene where they're standing side by side. They both are holding coffee cups, and they say, a lot of Danish politicians have been sent to Brussels, never to be heard of again. And then simultaneously, they take a sip of their coffee. I've seen that as a meme.
Yeah, isn't the tagline is in Brussels, nobody can hear you scream?
I don't know.
I think that's the tagline, and I think that's the name of the episode as well.
Okay.
In Brussels, nobody can hear you scream, because Brussels is the seat of the EU, and the EU Commission is basically like the EU government, basically.
Mm-hmm. So at Express, they're having a team morning huddle and discussing angles. Katrine brings up this commissioner story and the fact that Birgitte is going to be selecting someone very soon for the position. Lagerson says that no one cares about that. He's talking about the readers at Express. He says no one cares about that because that is too complicated and unsexy of a story. And in my mind, Amy, that means to suggest that his paper is a bit of a rag and that his audience is a bit lower, have a lower intelligence. Mm-hmm. Hen calls him out and says, complicated. Oh, come on. The PM is appointing a commissioner. Lagerson says, the Danes know nothing about it. Katrine says, so let's enlighten them. The commissioner helps legislate in the EU. Let's write about that. Lagerson says that, quote, people only want to hear about salaries and corruptions in the EU. Hen says, quote, give me a break. The commissioner is Denmark's voice in Europe. Every party wants that post. Lagerson eventually lets them take charge of it and that they will cover the story and bring it forward. Meanwhile, at Parliament, Kasper walks in to see Bent and Birgitte having it out with each other. Bent leaves, and Kasper says that he's noticed that things have changed between Bent and Birgitte over the past year when Birgitte asked Bent to resign. Kasper tells her that the media knows this tension and that she should reconsider whether to keep Bent on such high posts and that she should think about taking on a protege for the sake of the party. Birgitte says the most relevant protege is also the most logical commissioner candidate and that she selected Jacob Cruz for the post. This clearly comes as a surprise to Kasper, and she notices that, and she tells him she does not necessarily talk to him about all of her decisions. Kasper is not a fan of Jacob Cruz and says that he is focused on becoming a commissioner before he turns 40. Brigitte believes that Cruz can make a difference in Brussels. She thinks that he's young and full of initiative. Kasper tells her that Cruz is a, quote, yes man. And she tells Kasper that he sounds like Bent and asks him if he is jealous of Cruz's success and firm convictions. And then Brigitte takes a call and starts speaking in French, which I thought was super hot and needed to rewind a few times to enjoy that.
I rewound it too. Because I was in Paris for my semester break a couple months ago. And I was like using my French, my Canadian cereal box French as much as I could, but it was she sounded perfect.
She sounded perfect. Well, in Canada, I don't know if it's all of the provinces, but here in Ontario, where I grew up, Amy, you grew up in BC, we learn French from elementary.
Yeah, of course we learn French.
Right up until grade 9 and 10 of high school. Or is it grade 9? I can't remember. So all of us have semblance of French, but it's...
Yeah. And I took it all the way to the end of grade 12, actually.
Oh,
I took
really?
French all the way through. Yeah. So when I finished high school, I was like reading in French relatively easily.
Wow.
So it's in there somewhere, but it's a little rusty. But I could say when I was like, oh yes, I speak French, but I'm Canadian and it's a little weak. Yeah. And then people would actually continue speaking French to me. Like people actually attempted to speak French to me. So
I think that's great. And I think when you go to countries that speak French, you have to turn it on and find your French. That's what I felt when I went to Paris, navigating around. Like you just have to find your French that you learned and use it because You have it, you just don't use it because you don't speak French. But as we know, Tsitsi Babbitt Knudsen is fluent in French in real life, and she's actually done some films in French.
Oui.
So I thought that was really cool. And I thought it was super hot and sexy to hear her speaking French, but that's just my aside. Brigitte asked Cruz what he thinks about the post of commissioner. He says that he thinks that it should go to a moderate and that it's a unique chance for the party. She asked him who does he think it should go to, and he says Bent. Kasper later tells Brigitte that Bent would be perfect because of his international network, and she will get Bent out of her hair, presumably because they were disagreeing over a lot recently, Bent and Brigitte. Over to Express, where Han and Katrine are leaving the building, and Katrine tells Han that it's her 31st birthday in a few days. Katrine seems unhappy about her birthday and asks Han, what were you doing at that age? And says to Han, I know you were in Paris, you were a correspondent, and you had a child. I share my student's flat with my espresso machine. Katrine tells Han that her mother is going to tell her that, quote, I'm wasting my life and out to get a family. I'm wasting my life without a family. Han tells her to go home to her mother's house for her birthday and not to spend her birthday in a brain dead debate meeting. I love Han's personality, right? She's got so much flair and fire in her words, right?
She talks like me, actually. I would say something like that.
I wouldn't
say, yeah, that might be why I like her. And I don't think I would say brain dead. I would have probably said assy, but that's just me.
No, Han's got so much fire. I love it. She says to Katrine, quote, tell your mom you're coming over and to shut the F up in a nice way. That's the only one thing then worse than having a family is not having one. So Han is basically telling her, look, yes, families are annoying, but we need to put up with them because they're still essential. Brigitte brings Magnus to work because she's taking him to the doctor's appointment later that morning. The secretary sees Magnus. This is Brigitte's secretary, not the
new one.
The new secretary, the replacement for Sun. So the secretary comes in to see and sees Magnus, but she doesn't acknowledge him or says anything to him or hello to him. She serves him a soda.
The wrong kind.
She doesn't ask him what he wants. She puts it down, the bottle on a table. She doesn't even pour it for him in a glass. And she says that bottles belong on coasters because otherwise they'll stain the table. It's an expensive
table. Yeah. And not all of the allowances in the world could pay for that table. That's what she says to him. And it's just like, I'm like, obviously Kasper will not be making out with this secretary.
No, obviously not. This is like
ironclad.
Yeah, totally.
Very professional. A little too much, maybe.
Well, I think it's unprofessional to be so cold and distant when your boss's child comes in. You need to show a bit more, but she doesn't have it. That's just her personality.
Yeah, she's probably never seen a child before in her life, even when she was one.
So Bent comes to the rescue and offers to keep Magnus company. Thank God. That's my side comment.
Poor Magnus. I think he was terrified. He was like frozen on the little blonde angel baby is frozen on the sofa.
I know, like, what on earth is this robot talking to me? Anyway, so Ben comes in to save the day and offers Magnus to keep him company and gets him a Coke to drink. They're having pleasant chats with Magnus and connects with him so well, like on a family level. Brigitte comes back to her office and asks Ben what he's doing there. And he said he came to give her a list of names that he drew up for consideration for the commissioner's role. She says, okay, but she has a tight schedule and it's best if he make an appointment. To me, the old Brigitte and Bent relationship would never have been like this, but we know things have changed in the past year, which we can chat about after. Bent comes to Brigitte's house later that evening to deliver Donald Duck comments to Magnus to cheer him up, to make him feel better. And he talked about this when he saw Magnus in Brigitte's office earlier that day about the Donald Duck comments, because Magnus is not feeling well. So Ben thought these comics would cheer him up. Magnus is excited to have them, the comics. Brigitte offers Bent coffee and invites him to stay for a bit. He politely declines and asks her point blank, quote, "Why won't you talk to me anymore?" Her response, quote, "I do want to, but since you're not a minister anymore, we don't see each other that much." Bent, you knew why I had to fire you. Bent says, yes, but why did that entail that I stopped being your friend? Bent leaves, and shortly afterwards, we see Birgitte calling Kasper, telling him that Bent is her choice for the commissioner, and she'll talk to him tomorrow morning so that they can announce it at the press conference. Birgitte believes Bent has a lot of political pull and can get them even bigger things. Bent tells Birgitte he's not interested in the post. He says, quote, this is just to relieve you of your guilty conscience. He tells her that she will be rid of her most severe critic in her party. She says that she's trying to get Denmark a highly competent European commissioner. He accuses Birgitte of trying to buy him out. He also tells her, we've been close. We've stood shoulder to shoulder. If you can't fit me anywhere, fine, but don't try to buy me out. She turns around. Don't try to buy me off. She turns around and walks away. Birgitte and Cruz are walking with Kasper behind them, and she asks Cruz what he thinks of the job and that she's offering it to him. He says, quote, well, it's very flattering. I feel it's a huge responsibility for my ministry. He wants to talk to Bent because he thinks Bent should be the person for the job. Birgitte thinks that Cruz is bright and she's impressed by his loyalty to his ministry. But when they are alone, Kasper tells Birgitte, quote, Cruz is aiming higher. If Bent goes, then he will be second in command, and he's going to let that go to waste by taking a 5-year post in Brussels. Birgitte thinks very highly of the post. The press conference is going to happen in a few minutes, and we see Han and Katrine arrive. Han tells Katrine to find them seats, and she excuses herself. Kasper offers to take Katrine out for her birthday and implies that he's inviting her mom by saying, tell me how many will be, which was very nice of him.
Yeah, or somebody else. We don't know who. Maybe he's trying to find out if Katrine's seeing anyone secretly.
Yeah, that's another
thing,
option. So the press conference starts and Han comes back chewing gum. Birgitte tells her that she's working on finding the best candidate for the Birgitte tells the press that she's working on finding the best candidate for the job. She also tells the press with a smile that she does not comment on rumors when the press throws names at her, expecting that she would comment. Birgitte calls her on Han to ask a question. And Han wants to know if Bent is the candidate for the post. The press conference is done. Birgitte is aware that Express, which is where Katrine and Han work, Lagoson's paper, might write Brigitte's hesitancy as a suggestion of an inferior post, meaning to say that this post is an inferior post, right? Niles comes into Brigitte's office and says that Pernille is interested in the post. Birgitte says 2 people turned it down, and she is a good bet. Later in the scene between Katrine and Han, Katrine asks Han if something is wrong, and she seemed a bit distracted earlier. Han gets defensive and tells Katrine, quote, let me remind you, you're speaking to your editor. How I do my job is none of your business. And this, to me, this was completely like out of line, which left Katrine puzzled and speechless as Han walked away.
Yeah, there's obviously something else going on there.
Yeah.
You know.
So Birgitte and Bjorn meet for lunch in a quiet restaurant. And Birgitte says, Labor always wanted a commissioner post. I'm sure you're aware that it'll cost you. So that was a little side scene there, which I guess it was to show her she's communicating with Bjorn about this.
Yeah. And also because if they if they don't have a moderate to send to the EU Commission, because it's obviously always in your favor to send your own party's people.
Yeah.
And the moderates had never had an EU Commission seat. So to give it to another party, even though it's one you collaborate with, would be to kind of admit defeat. And so they have to exchange something for that benefit, because it's also a lot of money and it's prestigious, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's definitely an exchange in there. At least that's what I got out of it.
So Birgitte comes back to the parliament from her lunch with Bjorn, and Bent's wife is outside waiting for Birgitte. They have a pleasant hello, and it is clear that they know each other in real life, i.e. outside of work circles. And Bent's wife wants this conversation to be kept a secret. Bent's wife is there to tell Birgitte not to choose Bent for the commissioner position, and that it was a very hard blow to him when Birgitte let him go. He took a very long time to get over that. And now slowly he's turning back into a human being, gardening and being with his grandchildren. Birgitte tells her that Bent has already turned down the offer. And side comment to you, Amy, Brigitte's suit is impeccable in this.
Yes,
in this
I noticed it's the one with the piping, right?
With the
with the
white stitching or
piping. Yeah.
lined collar.
I was like,
and
I want that jacket.
I want that jacket too. And she had a
Yeah.
really nice white shirt inside. So Kasper comes home to the girlfriend's place where he recently has moved into, and his space is heavy with things on his mind. And she's simple and innocent, and she seems excited that they are cohabitating now. She's making a space for his things in the bathroom, and she's invited her friends over for a dinner party. And she asks him if next Thursday is okay. And he says yes. Han comes over unannounced to Katrine's apartment. I think she's feeling bad about the previous exchange of words when Katrine was being concerned about her and Han was abrupt. Katrine makes some coffee and Han confesses that she's been dealing with some personal issues recently and that she said it was her daughter's 25th birthday and the daughter's father's new wife can't stand the sight of Han. Katrine tells Han to screw the wife. Han is going to be there for the daughter's sake. Bent comes into Brigitte's office and says, I didn't make an appointment. Birgitte looks at him and does not even say hello and does not even smile at him and says, well, what could I do for you? Bent comes in to say that he's going to take the job after all. Bent tells him that Brussels was putting the squeeze on her, and so she's offered it to someone else, Pernille Matson, and who is the Liberal Party, right, Amy? Who is the Liberal Party leader?
I think so, yeah.
I think so. That's what I have in my notes. And she's not a moderate like Birgitte or Bent. Bent figures out that his wife, Kirsten, was previously there to see Birgitte after Birgitte asked him if he's cleared this decision to take the job with his wife in this discussion that he wants to take the job, right? And he tells her that the wife wants him to retire and that Birgitte should butt out of his marriage. Bent and Birgitte start shouting and says to her, you've made it perfectly clear that our relationship is purely professional. He asks her if the job he asked her if he has the job and he says yes. No, she asked him.
Says yes.
Yeah, she says yes. And she's leaving. As he's leaving, he bumps into Kasper, who says hello, and Ben just nods his head and keeps walking. Ben seems to be heated and needs to cool down. So the next morning now, over at Express, Han comes in looking sharp. She's wearing a khaki-colored suit with a white shirt and a scarf around her neck. She looks happy, and she tells Katrine she's having lunch with the daughter. Lagerson says to them, asks them who is covering the upcoming press conference, and they answer they both are. Lagerson says that he heard about Han's outburst yesterday and says, quote, drink yourself to death for all I care. Don't embarrass my paper. Are we clear on that? Han stands up and walks away. Katrine tries to come up with a quick response to save Han and says that she was distracted and it was not her fault. She distracted Han yesterday and was not her fault. Lagerson says to her, nice try. I'm not buying it, but points for trying to save your soul, sister. What a jerk. Anyways, Cruz comes to visit Birgitte in her office and she offers him the job of deputy minister. Bent comes to her office and they go over what they're going to say in the press conference. There's a bit of awkwardness in the air. She's going to say that he's accepted the position as a new commissioner and how happy he is, and that she admires his dedication and that he's always been her role model and mentor. And the big challenge now is how to manage without him. And there's still some weirdness between them, which is noticeable to the audience. And it's noticeable to us because we know their relationship, right? And their friendship. So Kasper now goes into the unisex bathroom. Amy, you had talked about this unisex bathrooms in season 1 of our podcast. Yeah. We talked about that in one of our episodes. So he goes into the unisex bathroom and sees Han coming out of the stall, swaying from side to side. She drops a bottle and falls to the ground drunk and cuts herself on the broken glass. Kasper springs into action, helps her to get up, and then he goes to the room where Brigitte's press conference is going to take place and finds Katrine and have her come to the rescue as well. She is shocked. Katrine is shocked to see Han like that on the bathroom floor and helps pick her up. And with Han's arm draped around Katrine's shoulder, she walks Han to the elevator and asks the security guard to call a cab for Han. She is sending Han to go home and sleep it off in bed. This is not good because we know both of them were sent to the press conference to cover it. And now Lagerson's going to be mad at them, right? Because they're not there in the room.
Yeah.
Katrine finds Kasper after the press conference and thanks him for being so discreet with Han. She asks who got the commissioner post, and Kasper said it was Bent. She says that Lagerson will be mad at both her and Han for missing the press conference, and that's when Kasper flashes a tape recorder with a smile and says to her that he's taped the interview for her, and she gives him a hug and thanks, which is very nice of Kasper and very intuitive. You know, we always talk about how intuitive Kasper is and how instinctual he is. So this was a good move by him. Tomorrow is Katrine's birthday, and she tells Kasper that she's not going to go home to her family's house for her birthday. And he asks her if she wants to do something. And she asks him if his girlfriend would be okay with that. He says, quote, "Sure, we're adults. I'll book a table for 7 p.m. tomorrow," and that he'll pick her up after work at Express. Bent comes into a room where Birgitte, Kasper, Niles, security staff, and others are in. Niles tells Bent that he will be under the spotlight to answer questions as a new commissioner. The interview is going to take place very soon in the next few minutes. Hesselbo, whom remember from season 1, was the PM that Birgitte took over, comes to chat with Birgitte, and she says she's finally chosen her minister with a smile, and she says, "I chose the best." The camera goes over to Bent, and he is sitting down with papers in his hand, and he slowly starts to lean to one side and passes out. Birgitte goes to his side immediately and frantically signals to the security guard to call an ambulance. She's then seen walking beside Bent as he's being led out in a stretcher by the paramedics. The next scene is Birgitte calling the hospital to find out what room he's in so that she can go and visit him. He's had a cerebral embolism. It's serious, and he's going to need surgery, she tells Kasper. Kasper shows her the latest from Express News, which is now Lagerson's paper, as we know. And the headline suggests that Birgitte had prior knowledge of this embolism that he suffered, and that he suffered one before, which is a false headline because Birgitte did not know his medical history. According to a source close to the family, this is a quote from the newspaper Express. According to a close source to the family, Nyborg was aware that Cero, which is Ben's last name, had suffered a cerebral embolism earlier that year, and yet she still chose him for the stressful post of the European Commissioner. Birgitte is on her way to the hospital to see Bent, but first she runs into Cruz, who tells her that he has the party's unanimous vote to take over if need be. Next at Express Media, and where we see Katrine comes out of the office, she finds a present on her desk from Han, who is seated near her while she is working. Katrine opens it up, and it is part of the wall. And
the Berlin Wall.
Yeah. Han says, "I broke it off 2 days after the wall fell," with a smile, which I think was so badass and cool, right? The present gives Katrine, and it's painted in a few different colors. And the card from Han to Katrine says, quote, "Congratulations, you have time to do it all." Katrine goes to hug Han, and Han says that her daughter, who has the same birthday as Katrine, stood Han up and kept her waiting for 2 hours. And later the daughter texted Han and said that she just couldn't face Han. So this is the daughter's text to Han, right? Saying she couldn't face her. The daughter, Camila, grew up with her dad. He got custody after divorce when she was 5. Han says she was away from home during her correspondent days and that she was never home in Denmark. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Ben's doctor tells Birgitte that he's likely to have paralysis on one side. Birgitte runs into Ben's wife, Kirsten, who is not happy to see Birgitte and tells Birgitte that she has no business here at the hospital. The wife accuses Birgitte of knowing that Ben had an embolism and still offered him a demanding job. Birgitte tells her the papers are lying and that she didn't say why not to offer the job to Ben. This is when Kirsten runs into her in earlier on. She didn't say why. She tells the wife that she knew nothing about Ben's illness, and the wife tells her that Jacob Cruz said that he would inform Birgitte about Ben's illness. The wife,
because she's like, "I told Cruz," and Brigitte was like, "What?"
Yeah. And the wife is like, Kristen's like, well, she spoke to Cruz a couple of days ago, right before she went to speak to Brigitte, and Brigitte tells her that Cruz did not say anything about this. So Brigitte tells Niles and Kasper that, quote, Cruz deliberately betrayed his colleague and me. After that, Cruz comes to see Brigitte. He sits down on the couch where he signals for him to sit, and he has his arm out on the couch, all casual and looking relaxed. He asks how Bent is doing, and she ignores him. Brigitte ignores him and says she's told the secretary, Niles, that effective immediately, Cruz is resigning as a deputy leader and that she is considering someone else as the new minister for European affairs. She tells him without flinching in a serious tone that he is taking over the commissioner post and rubs in his face that he was in favor of a moderate commissioner and he's the obvious choice. When he replies with a sob story about how hard he's worked for his family in Denmark, Brigitte simply does not care. She instead confronts him that Bent's wife went to him and told him of Bent's embolism and tells him that he kept it confidential and away from her knowledge. And this was to further his own interests. This is to further
obviously
his own interests. So Cruz makes an excuse and tells Brigitte meekly that it's not my fault that he didn't tell you. And she says sharply, stop, I am not finished. And she tells Cruz that he also told Express Media that she knew about Ben's illness to distract her, so that Cruz and to sort of like make a hit against her, and that Cruz
obviously
position as PM, right?
Yeah.
So getting towards the end of the episode now, over to Kasper, he finds an excuse to tell his girlfriend of why he can't stay at the dinner party that she planned, which of course is the same day, the dinner party.
And the same time.
As Katrine's birthday. And she naively says, okay, and tells him, I've been in a relationship based on mistrust. Never again. Go on. Which is
too late.
So sad. I feel so sad when I heard her say that. She looks so
that's
sweet
what
when she says it, right?
That's what I mean by she could do so much better.
I know. But the girl will learn. The girl will learn.
Yep.
He goes to pick Katrine up at Express, and she tells him that she's invited Han to come along with them, so that she does not need to be alone because Han's daughter stood Han up. And so Han observes Katrine thanking Kasper for the gift he gave her, and tells Kasper when Katrine steps away to go to the restroom that Kasper is still in love with Katrine. I can tell, she says. Obviously, the next scene is nighttime and Brigitte is in her bed working on her laptop when Magnus comes in to tell her that he's had a dream about Bent. And now that Bent is sick, he'd better pack Bent's comics and give them to her so that Bent can feel better to take to Bent.
That was so
emotional. Sweet. It was so sweet. I really like Magnus too. He tells Brigitte that he misses Philip and he wants to go to Philip. And she says, but I'm right here. And he repeats he wants to go to Philip. So the final scene of the episode is Cruz giving a press conference to thank the PM for this new role as European Commissioner, and that he's going to be sad to leave his post as Minister of European Affairs. At TV1, Torben and Ulrich are talking on camera, and they say that the rumor is that Bent was in line for the vice presidency. Brigitte goes to visit Bent in the hospital, and she passes his wife when she's leaving Bent's room. And they are friendly towards each other. So it's nice to see that they've made up,
that
right?
kind of gets repaired.
Yeah, it gets repaired. And Brigitte is alone with Bent now. And Bent is laying down in the hospital bed. He's got his eyes wide open. And she tells him that she's sorry about all of this. And she takes his hand and holds it. And she says to him, quote, do you think that we can go back to being friends? And he's laying down and he looks up, still looking up at his ceiling, and he squeezes her hand, an acknowledgement of the question with the response, yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was very, like going backwards to talk now, like the last scene being Bent and Brigitte. I'm very happy to see that their friendship is repaired, because honestly, it bothered me. I mean, I know I take
me too,
like they're my real life friends, but it bothered me to see two people who were so close drift so far apart, and the awkwardness and frostiness that Brigitte had to Bent. I don't know where that came from, actually. Do you?
Pressure. the whole thing of like, remember at the beginning, the very beginning, he said, you can't have friends in the castle.
And you have to make
know?
decisions that you need to make.
Yeah. And so like, when that happened, they even though she had to fire him as finance minister and whatever, and it's clear he still had a role in the party, but that obviously damaged their relationship. And like, it obviously was a little bit personal and he took it personally, but to have him hide, his health stuff from her, and it's just really sad. Like the whole kind of thing fell apart. And of all the people, he was her mentor and her closest advisor, and he should never have to make an appointment. If he shows up, he's there for a reason. Like, he's got some advice or some help or something to talk to her about that's important, and she should take it seriously.
Yeah,
I think. And if I wish I had a mentor like that in any of my jobs, like it would be so good to have an advisor to help you.
Yeah.
Who knows the ropes of whatever. I mean, obviously it's different. I mean, to work in politics is different than anything else.
Yeah.
But to have someone on your side like that, and like, who knows so much and all of that things and we know how experienced Bent is, because even when Magnus is sitting there with the wrong kind of soda in front of him, which he obviously doesn't like, he takes a sip. I think it's like a lemon soda, and he like makes a face. And when Bent hears the ironclad new secretary say, "Don't leave a stain on the table," he goes, "Oh, well, former Prime Minister so-and-so made a stain on this table, so I think it's okay if, So it was kind of nice to hear him like take Magnus's side and like let her know that he has more clout. Yeah. And his experience is so valuable. And for Brigitte to kind of push him aside was just really sad. And it's just sad for the friendship. And it was so horrifying. Like, I remember watching this for the first time and being horrified that he might die. And because you never know, they do kill off main characters sometimes in TV shows. And I was just like, tell your friends how much you care about them, because you don't know what's going to happen to them the next day. Yeah. And like the previous episode and this episode and the whole COVID pandemic and the fact that I got sick this way, was like, all of that stuff has been kind of weighing on my mind. Mm-hmm. So this was particularly emotional reviewing of this episode. And you handled both of these today. Like, normally we share episodes, but I was too busy and too sick to be able to do it. So yeah, you handled them both in this show, which is fine. And I'll take on the next two, I think. And, but yeah, it was just so emotional for me. Like, I was like crying when I watched this episode. Like, it was like really hard for me to. I don't know why. Some people say that the mental strain is a side effect of the COVID, but I think it's just me. And the fact that like to watch a friendship like that just go down so badly was just so sad. Yeah. And I think though we're now only in season 2, we met them in season 1. The way their characters are shaped, we understand very well that they were friends for a long time. Yeah. Even before we met them, they were friends. So to me, it would have been really sad. First of all, I felt very sad that they were drifting apart. And I agree with you. I do think it's stress. And we talked about this in the first season, how you don't know how situations are going to play out unless you live in them, right? So in theory, it's excellent. Oh, my partner wants to be the PM. Great. We're going to be this. She's going to be this. She's going to do that. But then when you actually live through that and you see the wear and tear of your relationship during this time, these are things that you can't forecast, right? Yeah. And just like when you're two close friends that end up working together and a decision has to be made for one to let the other one go, it changes it changes the dynamic without words changing it. The situations just change, right? Yeah. So and I was a little disappointed that the wife of Bent, Kirsten, did not go straight to Birgitte and talk to Birgitte. Like, why talk to Cruz about Bent's illness, right? Yeah. But I guess she thought Cruz would manage it up, right? And like, or maybe attention. Yeah, or maybe she thought everybody knew. Like maybe she didn't know that Bent didn't tell people. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know exactly what happened there, but I assumed she told Cruz because she figured Brigitte knew, or that he would tell her, or he said that he would tell her, right? Yeah. Isn't that what Kristen, the wife's name is Kirsten, I think.
Yeah.
And I think she says, didn't Cruz tell you? I think at one point.
Yeah.
And Brigitte is like, no, he didn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
So it's obvious that he withheld that information for strategic purposes. And that makes him a pretty serious lowlife, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Like, not only because he's hiding information, I mean, and hiding any information would be kind of a serious offense as far as like, in terms of like ethics are concerned, but to hide information about somebody's health that could harm them if it's not made, if you can't just hide information like that. Like, it should have been mentioned. It was irresponsible, like morally irresponsible for him to hide that information from Brigitte. And it's health information that obviously affected Ben immediately afterwards.
To be fair, to play the devil's advocate a bit, it's first unfair of Bent
to hide it. Yeah.
I mean, Bent, but I think maybe it's the situation of getting older. Retirement may not be that far away. You want to feel as though you're still younger in the game. Yeah. And politics is your whole life, and you can get this opportunity to have this great job, and denying his health issues that could, really, cripple him in this role. But you see, it has such a big effect because it's not just him getting sick. It would be the fallout of the role. Like, they'd have to find someone else. Like, this is not a role that, I'm a gas station attendant, and if I
absolutely
get sick for 6 months, they could just find someone else to pump gas. Like, this is something very, very big and serious. So I think it was Ben's fault. Ben should have said it, but again, I think it's weighing, he doesn't want to be singled out, and he doesn't want to be not a contender for the job, or to be able to take the job. So going now towards the end of the episode, when we see Magnus and that scene when he's gone to Brigitte's room, and he's going to say, he says to her, we should bring the comics for Bent, and he says that he misses Philip. What did you think about that?
I thought it was really sad. And it just obviously seeing Bent made him remember his dad. It's almost like Bent is like an uncle figure.
Yeah.
And the whole, we should take him the comics because he's sick was just it was so sad. It was so touching, and that childlike innocence. It explains and exemplifies the relationship. It's we should be taking care of this person who's like family to us.
Yeah.
And it kind of was a way, a little way for Brigitte to understand the seriousness, I think, of her loss there, and the loss of the friendship and the damage to the friendship. And also that Magnus still needs his dad, even though she's there all the time. He still needs his dad. And she didn't fight him. I thought it was also nice that when she said, it's quite late, and he's like, I want to go to dad's. And she says, but I'm here. And he's like, yeah, but I want to go to dad's. She just says, okay. And she makes sure that happens. So they're putting as far as their divorce goes, and as far as Magnus is concerned, at least from what we've seen so far, they're putting the kids ahead, prioritizing the kids' well-being.
So and they're not using the children. So Brigitte, she's not putting Magnus up against Philip. She's not bad talking Philip to Magnus, which is great.
No.
And I also like this scene a lot because it's very, I think the innocence of a child is very sobering to people.
Yes.
That as adults, we get caught up in emotions and conflicts and politics in friendships and all that sort of stuff. But to have a kid kind of just, what's that?
Drama,
yes.
Drama.
But to have a kid come in and just sort of flatline that all in one comment to say, we should bring the comics for Bent because he's sick in the hospital. Magnus doesn't know about political, he
doesn't care about that stuff.
Care about that. He knows what's important, which is I want my friend Uncle Bent to feel better.
Yeah, it was so cute.
Take the comics for him. I thought it was cute too, but and
very touching. That got me. I was like, oh my God,
I thought it was touching too. And I feel the strain of Brigitte again, having to be the mom of these kids and run the home, and even though maybe she doesn't agree or like Philip very much now, she's, as I said, as you said, I really respect the fact that she's not cutting Philip down.
Yeah. And also, like, in a way, it's like, yeah, no wonder she didn't remember to sign the divorce papers. I think she, just to refer back to the previous episode, partly she didn't do it because she doesn't want to. And it's like, if she doesn't do it, maybe it won't happen. And
Right.
partly it is like, look, I understand that this has to be dealt with, but like, I got bigger issues going on here. And I know that's the whole reason why they're getting divorced anyway, because Philip didn't want to play backseat to the nation.
Yeah.
And it's like, sorry, nation of how many million or one guy?
Yeah.
And like, it's pretty difficult to be PM. And I still think that a male prime minister would not have to consider his wife's feelings as much. And that a lot of wives put up with that.
Yeah.
In power, even when their husbands do ridiculous and stupid things. Hillary Clinton.
No, but I mean, just to hinge on what you said there. Yeah. And it's not just, oh, my partner is in a high job. It's in straight couples, it's men and women the men are in lower jobs. They're not the PM, but still a lot of women
it's
make
still expected.
Yeah. They make concessions to these men, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And which is, lame.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak to other people's relationships. And clearly, like I said, I've been home with the Rona with who? Two cats.
Yeah.
So I'm not in a relationship at the moment, but like, I think in a decent relationship, you have to share things equally.
Yeah.
And nobody's role
more
is more
equally
than another.
Nothing is over 50%, but more equally and make more an effort,
Yeah. And I don't think the monetary value of somebody's income or the prestigiousness or position of their work should determine the course of a relationship. No. I think those are extraneous factors. And money benefits relationships because obviously money makes life easier. We all know that up to a certain point. And then, but like, just because you have the higher income doesn't make you more important in a relationship. What does that have to do
or
with
more superior? Yeah.
Yeah. What does that have to do with anything? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I agree.
End.
So is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap this up?
I'm so excited that Katrine and Hannah are working together, and I'm really looking forward to more storylines. And I would watch a whole series about Hannah Holm.
So would I.
I would watch.
I think she's so great, and even like reading comments on Twitter, what people have to say, and comments in YouTube videos and stuff like that. People also really like Han. And yeah, this is my opportunity to give a very special shout out to all the new friends and fellow fans of Borgen and Tsitsi Babette Knudsen that we've connected with on Twitter. A hello to @R_M_Fernandez, who has the website cafethinking.com, where he blogs about Borgen. And
which I've read and have to help me make episodes for this show. I've read that commentary just to get like a second opinion on things and like
get another perspective other than mine.
Yeah, no, and just think like, I think, that's a really excellent blog on this show and it's worth checking out. So check it out.
So cafethinking.com.
Yeah.
And hello to @Anthony Cantor CA, who is a local Torontonian, just like I am.
Hey,
thanks for listening. All right, Amy, I'm going to take us out of this episode then. We'd like to thank our listeners for joining us on this episode. You can check us out on our website, the Borgen Podcast, where all of our podcast episodes are archived, and you can learn more about us and about the show. We'd like to thank our good friend Garth Jensen for providing us our intro and outro music. Thank you very much, Garth. And lastly, don't forget to check us out on all social media platforms. We are there and we'd love to hear from you. You can connect with us and share what's on your mind by using the hashtag The Borgen Podcast or by sending us an email or voice memo at theborgenpodcast@gmail.com.